You rolling? Hi, Pop.
Well, this camp was given to me by my two granddaughters and grandson, my son and his wife, and I have added to it over the years just for the heck of it. The three ribbons that are on the top front of the cap, the one ribbon on the left was the European theater ribbon, which indicated that you did service in a European theater. The second one was for air medals, and you got a medal for every 5 missions that you flew. And I flew 35 ribbonable missions. So I have the ribbon, and I have 4 Oakley clusters on it. Each cluster was the same as another medal. And the last medal is the one that I got for a Distinguished Flying Cross, which I earned on the way back from a mission. And one of the engines crapped out, and we managed to stay with the unit on 3 engines and got home safely. And the oak leaf was my rank at the time of my discharge from the active duty service. And this is a unit citation. The unit got the medal and the cluster for 2 missions that we flew, and I'll be damned if I remember which ones they were. And let's see. I don't know what that one is, I can't see it. This one right here.
Those are your wings.
Oh. I achieved the rating of a senior pilot. I was able to sign clearances for other aircraft or my own to go where we were going to go. And then I became a command pilot, which meant that I was capable of commanding flights of the whole unit at times. And over here are a couple of things. One of them is a fish, which I don't know what that means, and a flag. And forgot what that one was too. That one right there.
It looked like a cupid or something.
That was given to you by some Italian girl you met.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's a fairly good record of what my active career was all about. And it was a good thing to get over it and come back to the United States.
Okay, well, Harry, you were with the 450th Bombardment Group, which was the 15th Army Air Force.
It was, yeah,
And that was commissioned in May of 1843. Were you already in the service when that was commissioned?
No.
And so,
I didn't go into service until after World War II started. And I hung around for a while, and then I decided they were drafting guys to go into the Army, and I did not want to go into the Army and be a ground pounder. So I went down and signed up and volunteered for the Air Corps.
and was that after the 450th had already been instituted?
Yes.
Okay. So where were you shipped initially? Did you go to New Mexico at that point?
No, I was originally shipped to Nashville, Tennessee for what was called a classification center, decide whether you were going to be a pilot, a bombardier, or a navigator. And I made the list for a pilot.
Okay.
And so when did you arrive in Italy?
I didn't arrive in Italy until, let's see, 43, and actually it was in January of 1944.
That was right at the beginning of their service in Italy then.
It was when it was being beefed up, built up, the forces were being increased, more airplanes were over there.
Were you involved in the mission against Pisa, Italy, which was the first successful mission they had?
No.
Well, you were the 450th was stationed in what was it, Manduria? Manduria. And how many planes do you think they had, or how many bombers? Was it just bombers that were stationed there?
Yes.
How many bombers would have been involved that they would have had to accommodate there?
The wing consisted of 3 squadrons, and each squadron had 16 planes.
That's all there were in the 450th?
Yes.
Okay. So when you flew these big missions over the Balkans and Germany, there would be a number of different bombardment groups that would join together
Oh, yeah.
for those.
Yeah.
So you would just rendezvous at some point for the mission.
Correct.
Okay. Initially in 1944, were you more concerned about the German Air Force or about the anti-aircraft batteries?
Anti-aircraft.
Had the Luftwaffe been fairly well neutralized by that point? There was still a threat.
No, they were still very active at that time.
And you would have fighter squadrons that would accompany the missions?
Some of them, yes.
Now, I've heard all my life about, what was it, B-17s or flying fortresses? Is
Yes.
this what you were flying, or is it?
No, I was flying a B-24, which is called a Liberator.
Okay. What sort of self-defense did those planes have?
Well, we had a nose turret with 250 calibers, a tail turret with 250 calibers, an upper turret with 250 calibers, a ball turret with 250 calibers, and 2 single machine guns on each waist window.
Gosh, and I thought a flying fortress was supposed to be well protected.
Well, there were a lot of guns, but they didn't hit a hell of a lot.
Well, yeah, it's kind of hard to hit something when you're scared to death. So you just you hope for the best. Now, how many times did you have planes that were actually hit by any aircraft that you were flying?
Mine,
Right.
we had 1 hole in it from a machine gun, and that was the only hole or only damage we ever got from the enemy.
And is that when your engine stalled?
Mm,
Is that when you lost your engine?
no, I don't know when that was. It was just one of the missions, and when we flew, we were going through these concentrations of anti-aircraft guns, so you never knew what was coming from where.
So Harry, it wasn't long after you had gotten to Italy before they had the famous attack against the Prufening Aircraft Factory in Regensburg, Germany. That was February 25th, 1944. What can you remember about that, other than how to
I can
pronounce it
remember
correctly?
it was the first over 1,000 airplane raid I have ever been on. And it was just a constant stream of bombers heading over that plant, dumping their bombs. And we dumped them, made a 180 turn, came back, and as we were coming back, airplanes were still coming in.
said over 1,000 airplanes?
Uh-huh.
So at that point, Rome had not even been fallen because Rome fell the same day as the Normandy invasion. Where were some of these other bomber groups coming from? Were they coming from as far away as North Africa?
No, most all of our airplanes were concentrated in Italy.
Okay, so there were bases all over Italy.
Yes,
That, at least in southern Italy, which was in Allied hands at that point.
correct.
So approximately how many planes left your base that day?
I think there were 12,
12.
I think so.
Wow.
I thought you said there were 16 planes in a squadron.
There were.
And there were 3 squadrons in a wing.
Okay, I'll correct that. Probably 36.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
So how long was a typical mission between the time when you took off and dropped the ordnance and then were able to get back to the base?
Our missions were probably 6 to 8 hours long.
Oof.
So in reading this, what I'll call the blue book, and I'll just show it to the group for future people that are seeing this. This is a great resource if anybody wants to ever have the opportunity to read it. But it says that it was cold up there and not much oxygen. So can you tell us about the experience of flying for those 8 hours?
Well, once we got to altitude, which was anything above 10,000, and we generally bombed from around 20,000. At that point, it was generally about 40 degrees below zero. And of course, we wore oxygen masks in those days, and the breath exhaust from the oxygen mask would coat your jacket with ice. And the British, for some reason, gave us some electric boots, which were very nice. You could plug them into the aircraft system and keep your feet warm.
How about your hands?
Your hands had gloves on, and that's it.
So would they be numb at the end of 8 hours, or?
No.
I guess it's somebody shooting at you.
Yeah, right, yeah.
What if you had to go to the bathroom?
Well, you didn't go if you had to do a number 2. If you had to pee, you used what's called a relief tube. And it was a tube that you just put your whammer in and peed and went down to what was called a venturi under the airplane, which created a slight suction and would help the urine pass out into the air.
All right. How many total, yeah, I think you said it earlier, how many missions did you fly?
39.
39.
So let me ask you a couple questions on that. So at the beginning of the war, my understanding was that there was a 25 mission requirement before people could come back to the United States.
Right.
And at a certain point it changed, so could you discuss that?
Yeah, they changed it to 50 missions, but they gave you double credit for some of the more difficult and dangerous missions. So I flew several of those double missions also to get my 39, which equaled 50. And that's when I was able to come home.
Were those volunteer missions, or were you just ordered to make the mission anyway?
You were ordered to make the
Okay,
mission.
so you just got the credit, and it wasn't that you volunteered to get the extra credit.
And so to follow up on that, when did you fly your first mission? Would it have been like in February of 1944?
I think we flew a couple of so-called practice missions in January, and then in February we got into the real stuff.
And then when did you complete your 39th mission?
That would have been in June '44.
Good grief.
Yeah, I mean, it was fast.
So, Harry, they had a number of missions that attacked rail yards in northern Italy in the winter of 1944.
Yes,
I assume you were involved in those rail yard missions?
yes.
And I assume that they were intended to soften up the German forces for the offensive that the Army was planning. It says, when the daring landing at Anzio was conceived, the heavies were given a vital role to play, and the 450th severed its share of railroad lines leading into Rome and neutralized airfields from which the Luftwaffe might have interfered with the Allied landing. Were you involved in, do you remember those missions, whether you were involved in that?
Yes.
Okay. And in April, rail hubs servicing Germans in the east assumed top priority, so to soften it up so that the Soviets could invade the Balkans. So that was in April, so if you didn't leave till June, you were probably, yeah, because you told me before that the Balkans was a prime target you had flown over.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So that was for the Soviet, to help the Soviets in their invasion.
To follow up on that, one of the unit citations the 450th received was for Ploesti on April 5th, 1944. Does that ring a bell?
I think it was Ploesti.
Ploesti,
This
okay.
was a big refining area where the Germans had a source of fuel, and we tried to knock them out. The April mission was a fiasco. They screwed up on the navigation, and they had bombers coming in from all directions, plus the fact that there were low-level missions. I mean, they were going in low.
Mm-hmm.
And that was too easy for the Germans to hit, even with a handgun, for Pete's sake.
Heaven's sakes.
So anyway, they screwed that up. And later on, they flew a high-level mission, which I did fly on. But that was a whole lot easier than that low mess.
Now, there were ribbons that were given for that and for the Prufening Aircraft Factory raid. Do you have those ribbons on your hat for those two missions?
No,
Do you remember ever receiving them?
no.
That's a shame, since you were involved in both of them, that you did not get those.
I think they may have been covered by the unit citation, which of course we all got.
It's for superior leadership, the entire 15th Air Force, which was more than just yours, in striking the initial blow against Ploesti in April 5th, 1944, won a cluster to the DUC. So what is a DUC? Distinguished Unit
Distinguished unit citation.
Citation. So do you have a Distinguished Unit Citation?
2 of them,
You have 2 of them, so that's probably it may be incorporated in that then.
probably.
I can't imagine where else it would be. So after that, you were lucky enough to get shipped home, and what did you do for the rest of the war at that point? Were you still in reserves?
I was still on active duty at the time, and I was sent to Tucson to be an instructor pilot on the B-24. And while I was there, the base changed over to B-29s, and I became an instructor on the B-29.
Okay. And how soon after the war was over were you discharged?
very quickly. I don't remember how soon.
Okay.
Wasn't very long.
And so at that point, you, I guess, came back to Richmond,
That's right.
and you already knew Ida at that point, but
No, I didn't.
you did not know her at that point.
No.
Okay. At what point? When did you meet her, and where did you meet her?
I have a couple more questions about flying before we
Oh,
change
okay.
subjects, if you don't mind. So, Uncle Harry, your the 450th was called the Cottontails,
Hmm.
and why was that?
Yes.
Why was that? Why were they called the Cottontails?
Each unit tried to have some distinguishing mark on their airplanes so that you could identify them by the marks. For whatever reason it was necessary to identify them. And they used all sorts of symbols on their rotors to indicate what unit they were.
And while you were fortunate enough to only have received one hit on your plane, a lot of your compatriots were not that fortunate.
True.
Could you describe the casualty rate that your unit experienced over
I
the course
have
of
no
the
idea what the rate was, but there were several airplanes knocked down out of our squadron. I recall one instance, one of the other pilots asked me if I was going to the PX that day. I was standing down that day. Told him I was, and he said, "Well, would you buy me a pair of pinks, size so-and-so, whatever they were, I can't remember." And I did. And when I came back to the squadron that day, I put them on a shelf over my bunk. But he didn't come back. And I guess it's still there.
Yeah.
Harry, did that cottontail designation apply to the whole 15th, or was it just the 450th?
Just the 720th.
Just the
Just
720th?
the squadron.
Okay. Was the 450th, okay, which was the larger group, the 450th or the 720th?
Well, the group consisted of three, what was it, four? I think it was 4 squadrons.
Well, it's the 15th Army, it's the 450th Bombardment Group, and is the 750 a broader umbrella or a smaller group?
750th was a squadron.